Hi everyone, my name is Jessie Carson. I'm a design technology lead for Participedia. Thanks so much for the invitation, Fiona. I'm excited to be here. I'm recording from the unceded territories of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations people in so-called Canada. So I've been invited to give you a sort of intro to Participedia and intro to myself as a design lead for that project, and some of the other work that I do, which hopefully you'll find interesting and inspiring as you all are starting to write cases as part of your work. So really great to be here virtually by recording. Sorry I couldn't be there in person at this early hour on the west coast of Canada. So Participedia itself has two really key components, the first of which is the community that makes it up. So it's a partnership grant funded by the Government of Canada. And we have people who are partners, co-investigators, basically researchers, practitioners, students, teachers, educators from all over the world. And Fiona is one of those partners, which is really awesome. We recently had a conference in Hamilton, Ontario at McMaster University, which is where the project is situated currently. And I think you're also going to meet Bonnie Ewaho, who is the director of the project. So he'll give you more probably a bit of history and overarching democratic theory perspective on the project. But as I mentioned, I'm the design lead, so I come from that background. So that's kind of what I'm bringing to this presentation. So the other key component, obviously, is our online crowdsourcing platform. It's an open source platform, a lot like Wikipedia. I think you're kind of familiar with it. You're already starting to think about publishing cases on the site. But basically, it's used to collect data about democratic innovations, and it kind of forms the link between all of the researchers in our network and their unique research interests, as well as the wider community. I've also found that this platform is really useful for people in other fields like design and community engagement who aren't doing research but want to use the platform as a way to document their work or showcase it or get a broader audience. So it's got a lot of uses. So as I mentioned, I'm a designer. I come to the project from a different place than a lot of the people who are involved currently, and so I thought it would be helpful to give you a bit of background about how I came to be a part of this project and a bit about what I do through the cases that I've written for the site. So bear with me, this goes back to 2011 when Occupy was happening, and I was just finishing my undergrad degree in design in Vancouver. I had just spent a couple of years living abroad in Nicaragua and Nepal running volunteer programs. And I was doing a lot of thinking about how to be an activist and how design work can contribute to, making the world a better place, naively as that may be. But that's how I came to bump into Participedia through a research assistantship at Emily Carr, doing social media and other sort of designy things for the project in its early iteration, which was more of a prototype. And that's how I learned that what I was doing was in itself a democratic innovation. I didn't really know what that meant at the time, but so my earliest entry was Occupy. My first entry was about Occupy Vancouver. And so I started the process of sort of discovering the world of activism and how that links to democracy and citizen engagement and all those important things that you folks are studying. So that's the early story. But it also kind of helps me explain the platform, which I'm sure you know, but just to review, it's made up of cases, methods, and organizations. So in this example, the organization entry would be Occupy Vancouver. I also wrote a method entry, which is one of the methods of many that Occupy uses in different places, which was the Spokes Council. And then there's another case that was written by someone else actually about how Occupy Vancouver used the Spokes Council specifically to engage people in the community into that initiative. So that's just one example. Another side of my work is with a nonprofit society called the Vancouver Design Nerds. And this is a little bit later where I got involved. And it's an organization that does public engagement work through design. So we do public events, which are sometimes just for fun, and sometimes they are for clients who want to research a specific topic. But we use design thinking as an engagement tool in a sort of fun and silly way, but like sometimes on serious topics. So this is another example of an organization using a specific method and then creating multiple cases with that method. So the design jam is our key method at the Design Nerds, and we use that method in many different ways. So a couple of examples, we did a lot of in-person events before COVID. We're starting to do them again, but one case here is the Time Travelers Culture Jam, where we invited storytellers, women of color, artists from the community to pretend that they were from the future and come back and tell stories about that imagined future to the audience. And then everyone in the audience crafted time capsules from the future to reimagine what the future of arts and culture would be like in Vancouver. So that's one kind of designy way for people to use design fiction and thinking forward into the future to vision new things and create new potential outcomes for this. In this case, it was the client was SFU and the Mural Festival to consider. Another example of a case using the Design Jam are these global classrooms that we've been developing alongside Participedia, actually. And one was the Food Security Design Jam. That was our initial prototype. And upcoming actually is an event called Designing Democratic Sustainability, which is also put on by the Global Classroom for Democracy Innovation, which is kind of an emerging partnership between a bunch of universities, including one in South Africa, Stellenbosch, and hopefully some of you will be able to attend this event. It's coming up in September. So you'll learn at this event a lot more about design thinking and the kind of theory behind what we do and the methods to co-creating action for democracy and sustainability. So yeah, check it out. I'll send a link to Fiona to distribute to you as well. But back to Participedia and the platform, I'll just share a couple more examples of my work through Participedia. Later on, I was sort of re-recruited back to the project after I had spent some time doing other things. And I was able to actually do a master's in design at the same time as doing an RA-ship with Participedia. And so this ended up being my master's thesis called Citizen Spaces, which I also partnered with the Vancouver Design Nerds to do. So it's all like worlds colliding. But basically it's about grassroots art and design activism in public places. So it's about the right to the city and reclaiming that through artistic methods. Check it out if you're interested as well. This is one case study that I did through that thesis work. I looked at a lot of different cases of sort of site-specific, place-based art and design activism and grassroots participation. So yeah, I mean, that's one way for me that I was able to use the platform to kind of focus in on my own research interests. I'm really, my design background, I'm able to look at these things through that lens, and I'm sure each of you have your own unique way of looking at the world and the things that you're interested in. And so I just wanted to emphasize that this platform can be the central kind of database and hub for all of that really cool and unique knowledge that you're generating. So keep that in mind. This is one cool case, or a series of cases actually, that was generated in a couple of years ago. My husband actually is South African, so we go there quite often. And while I was there, I was visiting Lawrence Piper, who works at the Western Cape as well. I believe you probably know him. And so he and I met up in Cape Town and met with an organization called Black Sash, and just to chat about Participedia and see what we could do. And we ended up coming up with this idea for students of Lawrence's to actually get involved with Black Sash and lead some participatory initiatives in 4 or 5 different communities in rural Cape Town. So that was a way that I think it's the first time that's ever been done, where the platform was used sort of live during the research process, which is kind of cool and maybe you want to consider, is they created a main case for their project overall. And then they created these like component cases, which are like essentially sub-cases of the field work that they did for that initiative. And all of them used kind of different methods as well. So they created method entries for that too. And they're all kind of linked up in the data, which makes this kind of a cool way to do some analysis later, right? You can think about ways to visualize that. But basically these two are sub-cases, or we call them components of that parent case. And they all, with different communities and different locations, asking similar questions about, in this case was about how elderly folks were having challenges accessing social grants. So you might know about that issue, being from South Africa. But anyway, long story short, there's a lot of ways you can use this platform for your own studies and research. So jumping around a little bit here, we're going to go back and look at the platform itself and how we kind of have this seems very logical philosophy, but maybe wasn't so apparent early on, but that a project about public participation should itself be participatory. So the design tech team was founded by an artist in Vancouver. Her name's Amber Frid Jimenez. She's my mentor, really awesome woman who really took a critical eye to the project when she was invited to join and identified some key challenges that were like opportunities for improvement. So, which led eventually to us shifting from a closed source or proprietary way of designing to an open source way, which in turn opened up opportunities for students to be more involved, as well as women of color and of different backgrounds. So by doing that, we took it out of the private sector and kind of open sourced the project. In doing so, we created new opportunities. So we also worked very closely across the community to help identify biases in the data model itself, incorporating feedback and redesigning the platform to better meet the needs of the community and also be more accessible through that process. So this is kind of a timeline of what the platform looked like. Early on, when I started back in 2011, we did a design refresh co-creation process with the community in 2015 to 2018 or so. We relaunched the platform, and then now it exists in its current form in its second round of Canadian grant funding. So that's kind of the timeline in a nutshell, but a lot happened since then, and it really was. We leaned a lot on feminist approaches to human-computer interaction design. We published a couple of papers on that as well. If you're interested, I can send links. And today's current iteration of Participedia includes these research clusters. So the project itself, rather than just focusing mainly on participatory governance, has expanded to include these 6 areas. So participatory governance is still one of those themes, but we also have human and political rights, representation, accountability, digital democracy, and then also democracy across borders. So yeah, it kind of brings us to where we're at now, which is, for me, really exciting. I've been able to bring that work that I do from the design nerds, that kind of engagement work using design thinking, to the academic political science research space, which has been really fascinating and exciting to work with these amazing, brilliant humans broken into these 6 themes. So we're using this design process to question how can we mobilize knowledge in Participedia in the context of, democracy is currently in crisis, and how are we dealing with that? So there's a lot of sub-level, really interesting topics emerging. So stay tuned for what happens. We are going to see some emerging projects coming out of this process under each of the research clusters. We're calling them signature projects. Some of them will be academic in nature, publications and books and things like that, but we're also seeing really unique things like podcasts and video series and other creative knowledge mobilization strategies emerging. So yeah, stay tuned and get involved. We're always looking for new research assistants and ways that you can link up your research to ongoing work here. So there's lots of opportunity for collaboration as well. A couple of other ways the project is mobilizing knowledge are through the Teaching, Training, and Mentoring Committee. So anyone interested in teaching or on that path might want to check this out. There's teaching cafes on a regular basis where educators and students come together and discuss how learning about democratic innovations can be done using Participedia and in and around outside of Participedia, beyond the classroom, etc. So check that out. There's a summer school coming up in 2023. That's in Vancouver, where I am. SFU is the main driver of that, and we'll be talking about radical democracy for a week-long event in 23. So keep that on your radar. Like I mentioned, the podcast that was launched as well this year. Check out Just Participation on Spotify. It's also on YouTube. And we also launched a People of Participedia video series. You can see Fiona in one of those as well. That's on YouTube. Just Google that. And then, of course, our news platform is another way we get stories out into the world. So Yeah, that's the platform as it is today. Really looking forward to seeing your submissions and your case entries. And again, I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person, but if you do have questions, I'm happy to set up another time to chat. Or you can email me at info@participedia.net. I'm the one who answers those emails. So yeah, I hope that goes really well for you and in the work that you're doing. And I look forward to seeing what comes out of this. Thanks so much.